Hey, y'all, welcome into Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football game podcast. My name, this guy is Arki Shay. That is Demetri Ravanos. Demetri, man, it's really good to see you, talk to you again. We had a lot of great reaction to our first episode that kind of sort of blew up. You know, we're still in the infancy of this podcast, but
Sure.
this sort of showed what we think this podcast can be, and it's got a little bit of a loyal audience out there, and we're starting to see some of that. So, Demetri, I felt good after last episode. How about you?
Yeah, I did too. I told you when we were first sort of brainstorming this idea that I get that this audience is not huge, but the audience is dedicated. And I think we saw that in a lot of the responses, the number of people that told us that this is exactly what they have been looking for. They've been looking for some sort of constant, whether it's a news stream, walk down memory lane, whatever. They have been looking for a weekly presence of NCAA football in their life.
Yeah, and we're going to be excited to be bringing that to you all the way through the launch and hopefully beyond.
I was about to say, Arky and beyond, as they say in science fiction movies.
Well, the whole thing is, I don't know if you heard this, but I'm counting it down to the launch, and then we're shuttering it. So,
okay. I wish you had told me that before, but I understand.
We've got a lot of new listeners and viewers over on YouTube. Again, we're only 6 episodes into this thing, and we want to thank you guys for being a part. This podcast is literally dedicated to this college football video game, how much we love it, the features of it that we liked and didn't like, so on and so forth. We got 6 episodes in the can. We're going forward into the future. But before we do that, talking about the sounds of the game and talking about more things with it itself, I do want to take a step back in this podcast and sort of talk about what literally just happened in the last podcast, because we spent so much time with Matt Brown last week that I don't think we really got a chance to sort of react to some of the things that he was saying. And I want to give some people also a chance to interact as well. And I got some of their comments I'm going to show you here coming up as far as what they sort of thought of the show too, because we actually did break some scoop on that podcast. Like I know of at least 2 things on there that I know as someone who is pretty plugged in. I had not seen anywhere else.
Pardon me, someone who is pretty plugged in.
Well, listen, you don't get up to your 5G without it, right?
That's true.
So there was definitely at least 2 things I know I hadn't even heard murmurs of anywhere else. So we want to say thank you for him to come on and us for giving a chance to sort of react to this. First, let's talk about the announcers sort of tease that was thrown out there last week. If you missed it last week, Matt said, if you're not new to the college football universe and the broadcast universe of college football and to the video game universe itself of the college football game, the names you might hear that would be signed up as the 2 announcers that he knew of would not stun you. It wouldn't take, as he would call, Wikipedia Brown to sort of be able to figure that out. You giggled last time too. Let's just throw out there what we're thinking, because all we do is speculate too.
Yeah.
It's probably ESPN's top team for Saturday nights, right?
That would be my guess. I mean, if you think about all of the ESPN voices that have been in the game in the past, and in any capacity, there are some other options. It seems like Kirk Herbstreit is pretty obvious. He was the color commentator on the game for years leading up to it going away. Does that mean Chris Fowler would be the play-by-play man? I mean, Brad Nessler's not part of the ESPN family anymore, so that's a possibility. Sorry. The other possibility, like if you think about that last game, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my throat.
You're coughing? Well, there's a mute button, by the way. You could use that to protect some of our listeners.
Forget it. I want the people to hear it. They should know.
They should know you're struggling right now.
That's right. Nice. Good God. The other names that have been in this in the past that are, it looks like I'm weeping sharing this news. The other names that have been in this position in the past that not likely, but I guess you have to consider they could come back. Remember, David Pollack and Reese Oh, Jesus, not Witherspoon. Reese
No,
Davis.
it's Reese Witherspoon. It's Reese Witherspoon.
That's right. That's right. They were both, at least in the last game, and I think the one before it too. So they have a history with this. Could it be Reese Davis and Kirk Herbstreit?
See, I seem to think that you would go with Chris Fowler just because of the
that
two
seems
teams
most
who already
likely.
have. Yeah, it may not be necessarily you need the chemistry when you're just plugging in voices, but I do seem to think that, and I have no qualms and issues really with Chris Fowler. I think he's fine. In fact, at times I think he's pretty darn good at what he does. It just, I don't know, if you're going to be sort of shoehorned into the ESPN relationship, right? I guess my number one I would take out of that with Kirk was probably Chris Fowler, because it's sort of, the Chris Fowler voice does have some gravitas to it. It sort of feels like the game. But man, I'm gonna miss Brad Nessler. I know Brad Nessler can't do it. By the way, how about Brad Nessler leaving ESPN for CBS, probably thinking that game was never coming back, and now he goes to CBS. SEC leaves the CBS. SEC's leaving CBS, and the college football game's being left out. Brad Nessler's got to be like, dude, where's my timing? This is not the best timing I could have had in my life.
Never has anyone been more invested in the Pac-12's next media rights deal.
And by the way, I love Brad Nessler. Brad Nessler is so good in that game, and I will sort of miss him. But
which game?
The NCAA football game.
Oh, okay. I thought I was making sure you meant that and not the SEC on CBS.
Oh, yeah, no, I think he does a good job there too.
But see, the Brad on NCAA 14 is frozen in time at his peak.
I think it's sort of fair to say that. I guess you can always go back and play it and be like, this is peak Brad Nessler, who was very, very good.
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, remember, he was paired with Kirk, and granted, they are never like sharing secrets with everybody. They are never in a booth together, like calling a fake game as they record that. They both just show up and record their lines. But
I thought that's what took so long.
Yeah, that's what it is. You got to work out schedules. You got to make sure
every
scenario. That's right. Like they're just two testers playing every possible game.
Brad Nessler's looking at like, why would Tulane ever play at home against Ohio State? I don't understand. Like,
well, the Buckeyes want to recruit New Orleans.
Okay, that's right.
Come on, it's strategic. All right, let's get to the people.
Well, I wanted to say just real quick on this too, that I really liked what you were alluding to on that podcast about your regional idea, like the regional television, because the older game used to have like the big national satellite game, then you had sort of the regional games. Like, that feels like to me there's no reason why you couldn't have the SEC network team or the ESPN2 team. Like, if you want to stay within that family, there's no reason why that couldn't sort of be part of a feature outside of cost, I guess. But like, if you wanted to even specialize it more, make it feel more special and more like, hey, you got the national game of the week, then maybe Kirk Herbstreit's not on your game every week.
I was going to say, like, you don't even necessarily have to get real crews. You can just go hire a voiceover artist to be, the voice of the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, right? Like, you can just you can go hire a voiceover audience or a voiceover crew, one or two guys, to be your local broadcasters. I mean, just give them the same lines that Kirk and whoever's going to be his partner have.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh man, Kirk's saying it must mean something now.
That's right.
Joe Hawaii over here was saying, and that meant something too. But like, man, we are in the big time now in the Sugar Bowl.
Joe Hawaii of the Delaware Hawaiis.
I'll go quickly for a moment to one of the comments that we got over. I think this is on YouTube. And by the way, you can find this on YouTube. Just search for Dynasty mode. It's really, from what the analytics I look at, that's how most people are finding it. But you subscribe by looking at my name, Arki Shay. And this was from Bama Fan 15, who said, we ran across your podcast like 2 to 3 days ago on Twitter and have binge watched every episode. LOL. I've always wondered if there was a podcast out there dedicated specifically to this game. And now I know. Thank you for doing this. And thank you, Bama Fan 15, for finding us.
I don't think that's his Christian name, Arky.
I don't think it's not. Like, I bet $1 to a donut, and I'm betting the dollar.
Where's the donut from? Because I got to know what level we're working with here.
Well, we're going like a local gas station that's been there since 8 a.m. and it's
Okay.
4:30 p.m. So
Yeah, I will bet that donut against your dollar.
it's not the best, but it's not the worst either, right? Like in a pinch, it's not bad.
Listen, Sheets does a pretty mean donut.
Fair enough. This comes from Edark, from a Twitter who retweeted us on this. This was Jason is a Smith, who retweeted and said, "Dear EA Sports, please make a Pro Rel DLC down to Division 2. Please, I beg of you." And that's sort of the downloadable
Promotion and
content.
relegation.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to ask you.
I love it.
I wanted. Okay, all right. So you like the idea of a little promotion relegation going on?
So like you can like DIY this in the current game, right? But I do love the idea of, as downloadable content, you don't get control. Like, maybe you run the table in the SEC every year. Maybe you don't one year, and all of a sudden now you're in the SoCon.
There is a friend of the show, Justin Ferguson,
Mm-hmm.
who used to write about Auburn for local outlets down there, and now he does his own thing, Auburn Observer, and he sort of has a setup where he's figured out a tier system of promotion and relegation for college football. And I suggest people go out there and find it. It's pretty interesting. In fact, I think it's in one of his most recent newsletters. And it's a new, fresh element that I think could sort of get people excited, because games like FIFA, right, are like some of the most popular games on the planet, and soccer has been a growing influence in this country. That maybe why not introduce that as an option, right, for the new game, if you just wanted to, customize and play around. Come on, EA.
Bill Conley, who now writes for EA Sports, years ago when he was at SB Nation, did a version of this that was based on English soccer that broke it down to P5, G5, Power FCS, Lower FCS, D2, D3. So there were 6 different levels of the pyramid that you could be promoted or relegated through. And then the guess was, pick the team in the worst situation. I believe at the time this came out, it was sort of universally believed that was either Kansas or Oregon State. And the question was, like, how far down the table would they fall?
Oh, okay. Further than you think, probably.
Yeah, I think they would probably get down to at least lower tier FCS before the bleeding stopped.
Yeah, but not current Kansas. That team got me the over 1.5 last year on the wins.
Definitely not current Oregon State. I think, didn't they go bowling this year?
They absolutely did. They were very, very sporty. Even going to West Lafayette and playing Purdue. I can't remember if they won that game. I knew it was a lot fewer points than people expected. That doesn't really matter. What matters is this video game, and I wanted to add on to another comment. This comes from H2O Will, who says, "Thoroughly enjoyed the podcast. Trying to manage my excitement for the next year is going to be tough." And I wanted to ask you, sort of, Demetri, about that sort of sentiment. Thank you, Will, by the way, for hanging out with us. The more we get little tidbits like this, the harder it is for me to keep my enthusiasm sort of low.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought on the back end of that is that we can see the light, right? Like, we're right around a year away. And if we're going to have to invest a significant amount of money in these new consoles, how soon are you wanting to do that with where your excitement level is now? Because like we alluded to last week, you said you would not buy the new PS5 or even the new PS4 or whatever what it was, even at the time, until this game sort of came back. And now you sort of have a reason to do so. So how soon are you looking to sort of try to get the first piece of this puzzle?
So this is a really good question, because what tamps down my excitement is, oh shit, will I even be able to get a PS5?
Yeah.
And it's not so much like, oh, they're sold out everywhere. It's genuinely like, when does the supply chain issue get resolved? I can't see that happening very quickly. Like, have you tried to get your car's onboard computer fixed at any point here recently? My wife has to just get something, like, it's not life-threatening or anything like that. It's just like a chip has to be changed, or a wire has to be plugged into a different place, something like that. But we're talking a 4-month wait just to get, a system reset. And I don't think that's going away. So when you ask how quickly will I do it, for the first time in about a year, I turned my Twitter alerts back on for restocks of PS5s after last year
Wow.
because I
Wow.
am excited about it. I do want to get the game on day one. I just don't know that it's reasonable to think I will.
Yeah, I was thinking about that obviously last week too, because I don't have the most current Xbox. I have the one generation just behind it. So I don't have the was it the S or the X? Actually, I think I have the S, but that I think is one that's not going to be sort of compatible at this point. Who knows? We'll actually find out. And I started thinking about like, do I stay? I don't want to say brand loyal because there's not really a game on Xbox that I have to have the Xbox for. It's just what I've had since the Nintendo 64. It's been an Xbox, some version of an Xbox, and I started thinking about do I want to just sort of branch out to the PS5? Is it going to be that big of a deal to me? Do I want to get ready and upgrade to the next Xbox when that happens? Because you're talking about a significant investment that's probably not going to truly pay off for another 16 months, 17 months or something. And then it'll really pay off. Like it'll play off like a mofo right then.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question because I've thought about this too of would I switch over to Xbox because I have been brand loyal to PlayStation since the first one came out. I mean, I really think it's a wonderful system. And I really hate the feel of the Xbox controller in my hands. But if it is the difference between getting the game and not getting the game as we get closer to launch date, maybe I would rethink. At the end of the day, just being honest, like I am loyal to PlayStation because it's just what I've always had, right? Like I don't play and for years have not played any other game. What does it matter what the console is at this point? Eventually you get used to the feel of the controller.
No, that's a fair point. I don't think I would stay brand loyal to just the Xbox if like I had this kind of issue and like someone said they could find me a PS5, for example, if it meant this game. Like I have games on the Xbox now that I like. I like 2K. I like a little bit of Madden. I like BioShock. I like Red Dead. I like some of these games, but like none of them would change what system I would actually want to use like this one would. And I understand wanting to sort of get to the latest system because of all the potential downloadable content that you could have on this thing. And the way you could, unlike I've ever been able to do and ever sort of really wanted to do, really customize an entire game and a gaming experience. So I find that fascinating.
The other part of this to remember too is unless EA and Sony and Microsoft, unless they change their mind, by the time this game comes out, we'll be 3 years into the life of the PS5 and the Xbox. What is it, the Xbox Series X? It's not reasonable to think that the step down for each one would have the game. That doesn't tend to be the lifespan for game manufacturers of backwards compatibility. So, I mean, look, I do have some not real anxiety, I guess just real like resignation to the fact that, hey, man, you might be waiting a while to play this game. I don't want it to be the case, but that might be the case.
Yeah, and I'm over here with the Xbox One thing. Like, this thing's really cool and really neat. The wife got it for me for a birthday a few years ago, and I don't play it that much, but like, family's not going to see me if I get the the new Xbox for a while. Like, that may not go in the main theater room. That might go in the back theater room where I keep all the hidden extras.
Sure, the adult films.
Yeah. I still do film.
Yeah.
I totally do film. Oh no, watch film too. I watch film, perform film.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, you got to make ends meet. You know what I mean?
I understand.
It's an OnlyFans type of world. I wanted to mention this from Mike Sparkman, who tweeted, not only was this a great episode with some nuggets of information on the EA Sports college football game, I legit laughed out loud at the Wikipedia Brown reference, which was something Matt brought out there. And again, it got you too, Demetri.
It did. Like, very funny.
Yeah. You know what I think, and I I've reached out to Matt since our podcast, and we're going to sort of stay in touch with some kind of news and notes that we're going to be able to have during all of this. But I did find that he seemed to be really excited about the new feature that sort of possible but not totally confirmed when he was talking to us about having sort of a my career, my dynasty sort
Yeah.
of mode that had other personalities be a part of it, just not necessarily the way we would see in the game as far as the broadcasting, but as far as like social media personalities. And that I thought not only got me excited, but clearly he was kind of excited about that too. And I thought that's where we can grow this. That's where we can grow this game and grow this brand, which
Yeah,
is
I
to
mean,
be more in line with the internet age.
for all of us that sort of imagine ourselves as the coach in dynasty mode, like that's kind of the next step, is something along the lines of NBA 2K's my career mode, interacting with the media, interacting with all of the elements around college football. And, one of the things I always liked about that mode in 2K, particularly as you look at like the fake Twitter feed and you see personalities like Worldwide Wob in there is sort of a celebration about the weird side of NBA fandom in that game. And like, I don't know a major American sport with a weirder side of fandom than college football. Like, absolutely, I want that, like, the info wars of college football style reporters involved in this game.
Oh my God. Can you imagine?
Like,
Oh.
here's all I want, Arky. I want EA Sports, college football, 2K, what would it be, 24. I want it to include tiger droppings.
TigerDroppings.net. You are on the podcast, and hopefully you're going to be a part of the new game. Yeah, so that feature is, I'm right there with you. Like, there is just, but here's what the only thing I kind of worry about with that, which is because college football is so legitimately weird.
Yeah.
Like, how does that translate from an AI standpoint where,
Sure.
like they're just the weirdest things happen in college football. Is Spencer Hall going to be able to quip about something that sort of makes sense and makes you laugh, or is he going to have to just do more like, hey, here comes the Tulane Houston game and make a joke about one of the mascots?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would have to not only include the jokes about, teams, mascots, etc. You would have to give some of these folks specific scenarios and say, write a tweet for this. That they could put in like, hey, RB 28, got caught driving the stolen car down the strip in Tuscaloosa. And then, you have all of these funny college football adjacent people go and write their material about it.
Oh, yeah. Do you think they'd allow you as a player to create a Twitter, like sort of inside the game? It feels like a bit much.
They have that in NBA 2K, right?
Do they? I haven't experimented that much. I sort of play with it, like sort of see the tweets and the messages, but I never sort of got that deep into it.
The last time I played my career mode, because I mean now my son won't let me touch 2K. I embarrass him on it. But the last time I actually dove into career mode, I want to say would have been either 2K18 or 2K19. I'm pretty sure that you could post your own tweets at that point.
All right, then that works for me. I have no problems with that.
So let me ask you a question before we get to the next thing. I want to ask you about what you thought about something Matt said. Okay. What did you think about his belief that the game, just as a function of, or I guess maybe as a product of functionality, might have to avoid NIL?
I think, and we go back to our Dream Features sort of podcast on this, that I feel like they're not only just the newness of this is out there, just the impracticality of trying to harness this by the time you get to a July 2023 launch,
right,
is really tasking. So I sort of understand that part, and I'm okay with the sort of old school rules being sort of what they were as far as the NCAA probation oversight kind of thing. But I do find it interesting that since that's happened, the NCAA has come out and said, hey, now we're going to start looking into these NIL things. So watch out. So we may actually have a little bit of a recourse since even that last podcast dropped.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because I think that, I wish they would put like some sort of base level version of it in there. Just acknowledge that this is a possibility. or a thing that exists in the college football world rather than just not have it, because it is like all we have talked about this offseason in terms of actual college football.
Yeah. I don't think you want to just ignore the big elephant in the room when it comes to that. It's just, what is your baseline, like you said, for that? What is the acknowledgement of that? Like, do you have to try to pay a player out of like a recruiting budget? Like, do you like to sort of figure out a budget? Like, even though that's not technically how it works, it's the way to sort of introduce the idea.
This is why in our dream scenario, I said I wanted some element of politics involved. I want to have a part of the game where the coach has to glad hand and build up that slush fund to make it work.
Okay. All right. So, we do deal with like whether or not you have the training points, the discipline points, to sort of, keep a team on the straight and narrow. Maybe there is some kind of budgeting apparatus for player. Maybe it's, like you could pay this player that much, but it takes it out of the general fund. So maybe players don't get a second jersey if it rips. You're like, hey, listen, I know we were supposed to buy these before the season, but we're out of money. So
no, listen, I think that maybe you dive into something along the lines of like think about like your deep dive RPG games. Think about even like pre-video game RPG games like Dungeons and Dragons, like charisma points, baby. That's what a coach has to be functioning with.
That's true. Or like you have the video game version of maybe just whatever coach you are, like if you're going to say, if we introduce an athletic director mode at some point, maybe it is a Brian Harsin or Kyle Whittingham going up to a recruit and just actually sliding the folded piece of paper across the table with the final offer of what it's going to be, and it's the head coach doing. You're like, okay, Kyle Whittingham said $3,800. I'm in. So.
As I was listening to I think to Bomani Jones and Dominic Foxworth talk about, where we are at with NIL right now, and sort of compared it and contrasted it to the 30 for 30 Pony Excess. And just sort of talking about like, man, there were guys in that team that were getting busted over like $30,000 over the course of 4 years. Like how crazy
Dude,
NIL is at this point.
It's the dumbest thing. Like, I know we alluded to it. The whole thing on Cam Newton was like, what, $180,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And people were like, they would never pay $180,000 for a quarterback. And like, allegedly, Tennessee's got this quote unquote fund collective that is giving allegedly $8 million to a freshman quarterback.
Have you ever read Stephen Godfrey's like long piece called Meet the Bagman?
Yes, it's a good piece.
He has talked on his podcast before about he has taken multiple meetings out in Hollywood about turning it into a movie. And like, to a man, it always falls apart because somebody else gets involved that just says like, I just don't believe this actually happens. Like someone from outside the South will say like, I just don't believe, like, what are these guys paying this money get out of it? I can't believe that they're throwing that kind of money around.
That's the thing. Like you have the money, you just want to spend it to see your football team do good. It's not like most of these people aren't looking for ROI when it comes to like signing up.
Exactly.
Yeah, like they're just wanting their team to be good. That's the return on investment. They're not looking
exactly.
How many impressions did that guy's tweet give me?
The weird thing about college football, to explain it to people that know nothing about college football, but know about sports, right, is you've got to stop thinking of this as sports and start thinking about this as like Dynasty, right? Like start thinking about this as Dallas. Like that's the level of fandom and functionality we are talking about with the money people in this sport. And I'd love to see that reflected in the video game in some way.
Yeah, why not? I think the biggest issue people have is that it's happening in front of their face now, and people don't see it.
As a booster, right? Let's say Arki Shay is the big money backer that Montevallo University has been waiting for to
University of
Montevallo, apologies, to not only launch Hawks football, but also get them, right where they belong in Conference USA. What would be more exciting to you? Would it be donating enough to have your son and wife and your name on like the Shea family athletic complex, or would it be paying enough to be the avatar for the University of Montevallo booster that appears at NCAA football.
Oh, the football for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's got to be a younger class of like
I want to be the
boosters.
I want to be the Montevallo Papa John. Is what I want to
be. Of course.
Yeah. I want that kind of connection to the school.
I kind of at this point, like we're not that far away from Papa John being the Montevallo Papa John, right?
It's a pretty fair point, to be honest with you. Move this along to the next comment we have. This is from Coach Guns. We love Coach Guns, and he has been on board since day one with us. He says, "Very good podcast. Sadly, I want more. Next time we have him on the pod, Matt on the pod, you should allow the community to submit some questions. I got tons." By the way, his biggest question is whether or not this game is going to get on PC. That seems to be his biggest question.
It's a good question.
It is a fair question. Yeah. I didn't realize, sorry to interrupt, I didn't realize how much there was a love for PC because apparently it's extremely customizable. And that's just a feature, and that's just never a console or a mod that I played on the with that game was ever on PC. So yeah, I think it'd be fair to ask.
I had an uncle that had a FIFA game for PC, like in the early days of EA making FIFA games, right? And it was only a few years ago that I realized some of the leagues that were on that game were not on the console games until years and years and years later. I mean, there's just so much more memory to take advantage of on PC games. And honestly, it's a little bit surprising that there hasn't been a big popular breakout college football simulator video game kind of thing on PC in the meantime between these two, because there's such a big world that could be created with all the space you have on a PC that doesn't exist on a console.
Wasn't it was it Doug Flutie who came out again with another sort of customizable one where you sort of from scratch can make your university as such, but like it's so much extra work for not enough bang for the buck, I would think, even though it was only like $15 or $18 or something to do.
Yep.
Like, and it's completely customizable, and you can play it. Just, I feel like when you don't have at least the base, knowing the base, the comfort base of the fallback on the sport itself, the conferences themselves, that it just kind of feels like you're just kind of creating something in Photoshop or an Illustrator or something. Like it doesn't quite have the same. And it probably doesn't help that like their gameplay wasn't nearly as, exciting and excitable as what you would find with an EA backed game. But
when was the what year was the Black College Football experience? Was that while we were still getting NCAA games, or was that immediately after we stopped getting NCAA games?
Let me find that out for you real quick.
Because that was a cool concept. The problem was, unless you were from a specific area of the country, the teams were so small you probably didn't know they existed. I mean, look, Matt Brown talked about the fact that like he didn't know what a FAMU was growing up in Ohio.
Right. It was 2009. That's
okay. So we still had the NCAA game going on. And you know what? That makes sense because that sort of coincides with the next generation of consoles cutting out the FCS teams.
Yeah, and I'd really like to get back to those. Let me see if I can get that one tweet to show up. That'll be good for us, and it worked out. Good.
Yay.
Chris Yao says, "I love to hear at JSU Gamecock FB will be in the new game. I'm legit buying a console just for this game." And, we're right there with you, Chris, as far as the console itself, maybe having to get just for this game, absolutely would do that. But the FCS teams were sort of a pleasant surprise to hear that the work is being put in to put them into the game at some points. I did find the interesting part to be about the stadium renderings and how they may look by the time we first see them, because there's just so much extra work. It may look, not to be rude, but like minor leagues in the baseball games.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the example I used with MVP baseball was, you had all the real major league parks, but you could play AAA and AA teams, but the stadium that the Durham Bulls played in looked nothing like the one that's about 20 minutes from my home. Right. The interesting thing to me would be how those FCS teams are implemented, because if you are telling me I can get every FCS team for a single price, then I'm all in. If I've got to pay per FCS team or per FCS conference, I feel like that's, I don't know, unless you are a diehard fan, alum of one of those schools, that may not be enough bang for the buck.
It may not be, excuse me, it may not be, but I feel like if it's bonus, like extra content sort of bonus, I feel like for me, like it's got a good chance to. I don't know.
I mean, look,
I want the teams in there. It's just, would I pay extra for them? And is that enough for me?
Yeah,
probably. Like if you find a price point for me, they'd probably be okay. Because I'm the guy that I want the ultimate experience.
Yeah, what Matt said, what he suggested was $15 to use all of the imagery, uniforms, helmets, etc.
He called them iconography.
Iconography, yes, of a team. Like that's a non-starter for me.
I'm sorry, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking like $15 just to have Chattanooga in the game.
Oh, you mean one team? I thought he was thinking it was going to be like a package. I did not take it as, maybe he did mean one team. Yeah, so
I mean, the way he said it, it sounded like he meant one team. Now, I will say, if we're talking 15 per conference, that still might be a non-starter for me.
Yeah, so I'll say so I'll say this, that if it's that much per, let's just say this, for the entire FCS, you would do it, yes, for $15?
Oh, for 15, yeah. Like I would go to like 25 for the entire FCS.
Okay, and if it went down per conference and it was like, say, $10 a conference?
No.
Well, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to want to pony up early because of the fact that this game came up, if it came down to that. Yeah, I think per team, no, there's no way I'm doing that per team. That's just way too much money. And I still like junk food. So like it's going to be hard for me.
Honestly, Arky, I still like other stuff, period. Like again, even if you did like $2 per team, you're talking close to $200 for every FCS team.
And you're already paying what, $70 you'll probably pay for when the game comes out, and then $300 for the console, $400 for the console, just to get it into your house.
For the base model PS5.
Just hoping that comes down a little bit. So yeah, it's a significant investment. So excuse me, I would think I should have muted myself. I'm sorry. This is what it's like when your 9-month-old gets sick for the first time, and you realize when they get sick, you get sick.
Right.
So, yeah, that price point is going to be very, 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 very interesting, because I literally did take it as $15 for all FCS, and I was like, done. Like you got
I mean,
that
if that's the case,
one.
awesome. So. Like that's going to be, I think, a talking point about a lot of the downloadable content in this game is, cost benefit analysis, right? Like how much is hyper realism worth versus at what point is this level of realism not germane to your enjoyment of the game? Like, where can you say, you know what, if I live in a world where the FCS doesn't exist, I can be okay with that.
Yeah, like we've done it before. I mean, we've done it many, many times. Like it's not like we have to have, Chattanooga in this. We don't have to have we don't have to, but we appreciate them being a part of the game.
Sure.
And then you start thinking about, like, if you're going to make that extra content, because they're going to want some of the money for doing all the work, like, how much is Chattanooga getting of that $15?
Right.
If it's for, like, the entire FCS. Now, if it's like, I would say how Chattanooga would want, every time you'd want Chattanooga, they would want to cut of the $15.
Which they should.
Of course. But, like, for Chattanooga, the value's got to be just being a part of the game.
Yeah.
Even though you're not going to get one of those top 4 tier systems like we sort of heard about.
I go back to what I said back when the news was that Georgia was not going to be a part of this game. Like, that's not going to last long. You don't want to be the one coach on the recruiting trail that can't point to, the system and say, you could play as yourself on that thing. And granted, it's a very different thing with FCS than it is at the Power 5 level. And so, Matt Brown told us he expects what would it be, 133 FBS teams by that point to be involved in the game. I think it's important for the FCS teams to play ball as well. Maybe they don't have to play ball in terms of the payments to the student athletes. Maybe they do. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea that FCS will be there. I don't know that it is necessary for me to enjoy the game, though.
Well, what I find fascinating also about that, then I'll get to my last topic here, is we understand that they looks like they're going to pay. Well, actually, this will dovetail right nicely into it. This looks like they're going to pay current athletes from the FBS level to be inside the game. Does that also sort of apply for the FCS teams that were coming in? Because I would think at that point you start looking at it becoming cost prohibitive
Agreed.
to be able to invest that much in this game. So then is that just give everybody see if they'll take a copy of the game, or do you just not deal with this since you're not even rendering stadiums for some of these?
Yeah, I don't even think
you just want to get the iconography in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even think you deal with the players at the FCS level. I think that $2,000 to $3,000 payment that Matt theorized per player is it's really interesting. I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but at the same time, you're going to have
$8 million as a quarterback allegedly for or even like Alabama's Bryce Young is making seven figures, like $2,000 to $3,000. It's not nothing to most people, most of these, but there's a lot of money floating around.
No, there is a lot of money floating around, and in a lot of places there is money floating around, that's there to make sure that you don't go elsewhere, right? So like you will hear stories of like backup offensive linemen at Arkansas still have an NIL deal. And the idea is that, hey, if we're paying them here, LSU can't pay them. So that is out there. I get it, but that's not the overwhelming majority of the guys making NIL money right now. Certainly a lot of them are. And my point, like that $2,000 to $3,000 range, it's not an insignificant number, but do we get to the point where, we have a bunch of guys like, let's use a Bryce Young as an example. Let's use a CJ Stroud, a Caleb Williams. Do we get to the point where, Alabama's roster is full of real players and then there is QB number 9? USC's roster is full of real players and then there's QB number 13? Because to those guys, like, it's not worth it.
Well, I was just about to ask the question to you with my mouth. Mm-hmm. What do you think the number, Matt talked about if they get to a certain threshold of number of players that they can universities that collectively sort of agree to do this name, image, and likeness, sort of sign on as sort of a union, which will be interesting to see how that would play out.
Yep.
What if even more than we are expecting players won't do it for the $2,000 to $3,000? Like you said, like a Bryce Young says, yeah, it'd be fun to be a part of this game, but $2,000 is nothing for what I'm getting right now. Or Caleb Williams says, that's nothing. Or Spencer Rattler says $3,000. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, like if they say like, hey, the low end, we're talking, multiply that by 10, make it 20,000, make it 25,000, and we'll talk. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, I really think EA screwed themselves by getting cute. I've talked about this before. I think they screwed themselves by getting cute and playing right up to the line with these player likenesses. I really think we would all be okay, even if we don't think we would. I really think we would be okay if real players were not in the game.
Final question, then. That's exactly what my final question. What did you want to follow up on that? I'm sorry.
No. Because your final question probably will involve this answer.
Do you think it's the right decision by EA Sports to want to pay current athletes, or should they pay a cover athlete and then go with the avatars and just sort of generate, like you said, what we generally get to the Dynasty pretty quickly anyway?
Yeah, I mean, look, morally, it is the right thing to pay these kids. Like, there is, I get, we all love the iconography. We love the helmets. We love the jerseys. We love our team's logo. I get that. I really do. I don't want anyone to think I'm saying the teams themselves do not matter. They do. But, there is a different level to my fandom for Alabama since the Julio Jones day, since that caliber of player is coming regularly to the University of Alabama. Arky knows this well. I love the University of Hawaii's football team. At the same time, as much as I love the Rainbow Warriors and have since I was a kid, there's something special about Cole McDonald that I really enjoy. Just the fact that, like, I'm never sure from game to game if he has played football before. That, like, the players and their personalities and their quirks are important. So if you're going for hyperrealism, then yeah, give me hyperrealism. That being said, to me, Arky, and maybe this answers your question, maybe it doesn't. To me, that is a plus. It's not a deal breaker for me. Because I think as much as we all think we demand hyperrealism, there is enough loyalty to the programs that all you want to do is play in that stadium in that uniform.
Yeah. 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 I mean, yeah, I hate to say yeah over and over again, but like I'm sort of maybe 10 years ago we feel differently about this. Maybe we're not as like, because I think with a lot of things with our society, like we sort of morph how we feel about whether or not like, legalizing marijuana and stuff.
Sure.
Like we just are changing. Like maybe we start to feel more and more the pendulum started to swing in favor of the players getting paid, and now the players getting, like, maybe when we're coming out with 2015 right afterwards, we're like, no, why should players get paid? No, just be in the game, whatever, or not whatever, but just sign a waiver. Like Mark Emmett famously said in court. Like
I would still
get another waiver.
I would still say that I am surprised that the idea of just giving them a free game is not enough. I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying I'm surprised that has not even been floated, because, like, if you're a college kid, you'd be thrilled with that. At the same time, yeah. I understand that this is coming from the O'Bannon ruling, and that, EA Sports, of course, has to use that ruling as the jumping off point to paying these kids. I think it's a great thing that they want to, and they are not saying, you know what? Everyone is going to be a rhinoceros instead of a human being. That'll take care of this.
Hell yeah, rhinos. I'll just say this. That's where I would have started with the free game, like free game for every year that you're in the systems kind of thing. You get the new one until you graduate out or whatever. But yeah, like I wouldn't have been bothered by a game that did not have the current players, but also had like maybe a cover athlete, right? Like they had someone that wasn't just a legend, quote unquote. Yeah. It was actually, a Spencer Rattler. Well,
like maybe there is a deal that last year's Heisman winner automatically goes on the cover of the game.
Yeah.
And that's part of winning the Heisman Trophy. Let me throw one last wrinkle at you. And maybe this is a good place to wrap up, because I might have to run here after. Would you be okay if we do exactly what you and I have been saying? Everybody pays or says, yes, I'll take the $2,000 payment to be in the game. And then, just hypothetically, let's say Anthony Richardson down at Florida says, that's not enough for me. You're going to have to pay me more. Would you be okay if a guy like that, forget Anthony Richardson, let's say Bryce Young specifically, he has the Heisman, he is the star of the sport right now. Would you be okay if a guy like that says, well, I'll be in the game, but I'm going to need, this $3,000 payment, plus I'm going to need to be a DLC and I get a cut every time I'm downloaded? Would you be okay with certain players, certain current players downloadable content?
Yeah. Like if you, even going back, if Reggie Bush still wanted to be able to get, you get Reggie Bush statistics as Reggie Bush, but let me tell you, players, sure, I would just say, yeah, if anybody said that's what we want to be, sure, then, but
I want a long snapper from Purdue demand that he be DLC in the game, and I would download him multiple times and put him at every position.
That's where you may make the DLC exception, right? It may not be the FCS teams, but that would be solid. All right. That's going to do it for us. Next week, we're going to talk about sounds of the game, soundtracks of the game from the past and stuff. So I'm really excited about that.
I want to throw an idea to you for a future episode.
All right.
What if we write our own game day signs to be included in the game?
Oh, dude. Because that's something I think we need to get the community involved in too.
I want the legendary
that on YouTube and on wherever you get the podcast.
I want the legendary ESPN penis sign in the game.
Hey, man, it all works with ESPN, brother.
It does.
All right. Until we get to those game day signs for the video game, we'll be back next week. Until then, Demetri, say goodbye to the people.
Save and sim to next week, everybody.